All right, as budget talks continue to be in overdrive now, let's speak to a political economist, Dr. Lumkile Mondi, for some analysis now, just to get a sense of just should this budget not be passed, what's at stake, and what does he make of some of the standoffs that we've seen. Dr. Mondi, good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. Firstly, there's a view, right, that the standoff, for example, as one maybe might even call it, was to be expected because the parties were not always going to just sing kumbaya and agree with each other on everything. What should we read into all of this?
We should read the maturity of our democracy, that we've managed as voters to find a compromise whereby we're demanding from each of these parties that we voted for to put South Africa first. Therefore, in doing so, it requires quite a lot of maturity. So what we saw in the past few weeks are these parties starting to mature, understanding that South Africa is bigger than them, and therefore they need to fund a deal. So I'm excited that over the weekend, it seems as though the two dominant parties, the DA and the ANC, seem to have found each other, and on Wednesday we should have the budget pass, so that government can get on with its work and implement its programs.
And you talk about maturity, which is something that a number of people have also been speaking about. How much of concessions also need to be made in an arrangement like this one?
Well, they have to think about what South Africa needs at the moment. What we do need, we need a functioning government. We need a focus on creating opportunities, particularly for younger people. But also we need to deal with the turbulence that we've seen globally, where we need to align our interests by putting it first. In doing so, negotiate with the other countries to find a solution to the disrupted trade regime so that South Africa can maximize its interest, allow us to export more, and domestically create those job opportunities which are needed given our high levels of unemployment.
How do you think they're going to do on the VAT issue?
On the what issue, sorry?
The VAT issue.
The VAT issue, I think on the VAT issue, the DA is going to agree to the proposal that it goes up. But in return, we need the ANC, therefore, to allow the DA to play a much bigger role in policy making. For example, there are issues that include the devolution of certain powers, such as, for example, the commuter rail system, that by devolving that to local government, therefore you're putting the burden to communities to choose the best mode of transport and to pay for it in that regard, including, of course, the generation of electricity and other services which the national government has so far failed in delivering. So in that sense, it's the path that we expect, because all these efforts are trying to put South Africans first, put South Africa first, and therefore do the things that we're not seeing in the first stages of democracy, whereby poverty, inequality, and infrastructure have fallen completely. And in that environment, we find ourselves in deep problems, in a very, very dangerous and difficult global order, politically and economically.
And when you look at, some of what the DA has to say, and it's not the only one, some of the parties and economists like yourselves, is that when you look at the issues of expenditure, it's important that, there are some moves that are being made in that particular regard as well. So how much of what we've seen, particularly the political turmoil over this, particular budget, is now supposed to lead to new approaches, especially when it comes to expenditure planning and review?
So what is important are some of the decisions that you need to make in terms of cutting expenditure. Remember, Bongiwe, that what you want to do is you want to make sure that there is value for money for South African taxpayers. The burden to ordinary households is very, very high. So in doing so, it means that you cut expenditure in areas which are luxury, and in doing that, you bring in efficiency. And you also talk to the issues of capability and competency, because we know that in many areas of our government, as Kaweni wrote over the weekend in newspaper, in relation to some of the people that are occupying high position who have got no qualification, but were deployed there as cadres. So we need to remove all that and put capable people so that we can start getting a buck for our money. But more importantly also, the Treasury in general has lost a lot of credibility in financial markets. Because if you look at the debt profile, if you look at how the expenditure has gone on without any returns to South Africans in terms of brand infrastructure, reliability of services, that has undermined the Treasury's credibility. So I think it's the Treasury that needs to make sure that it listens to other parties, and in doing that, it is helped to rein in expenditure, because if we do that, then we can start talking about a low-cost economy and talk about whether is the monetary framework that we have of 3 to 6% not too relaxed. Should we be looking at a lower inflation of about 3%, so that if the cost of funding at inflation is about 4.5–5%, therefore meaning that South Africans can now afford a lot of borrowing because there's low inflation, but also interest rates are low, and therefore we start seeing economic activity because the cost of borrowing is very, very low.
Now, as a final question, then, what would be, the implications? Let's say the budget does not go through. What would be at risk?
So the lack of credibility that we see today will just deepen. So I think the DA understands that, and hence it's willing to support the ANC to pass this through, because for the DA, what it wants to do, it wants to see itself getting more than the 20% that it's got in the election. It wants to be a dominant party. It means it's got to be seen to playing along to put South Africa first. And I think on Wednesday they'll support the Minister of Finance and we'll get going in making South Africa work.
All right, Dr. Mondi, I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much for chatting to us. That's political economist there, Dr. Lumkile Mondi, speaking about the issues around the budget.